She handed Ben the map. It fluttered so much in the wind that he could hardly hold it. Anxiously, he scrutinised the lines the rat had drawn. We really do have to go further south, he called. If we turn east now, we'll end up in the patch of yellow. So? Sorrel closed her eyes. Good thing if we do. That's where Gilbert said we should stop and rest. No, he didn't, cried Ben. You mean grey. It's the grey parts he told us to rest. He warned us against yellow. Look. Ben switched his torch on and shone it on the words at the bottom of the map. Gilbert wrote it down here. Yellow equals danger, bad luck. Sorrel swung round crossly. I knew it all along, she spat. You humans always think you know best. Honestly, you're the end. We're flying in exactly the right direction. My nose tells me so. Understand? Ben could feel Firedrake slowing down. What's the matter? The dragon called back to them. What are you arguing about? Oh, nothing, muttered Ben, folding up the map and putting it in Sorrel's rucksack. Then he peered anxiously out into the night. Day dawned very slowly, and in the grey twilight Ben saw mountains for the first time in his life. The dark shapes emerged from the morning mist, with their rocky summits outlined against the sky. The sun made its way between the peaks, dispelling the twilight and painting the grey rock in 1,000 bright hues, so it's got rid of that darkness and brought in the colour. Firedrake sank lower, circled among the steep slopes in search of the landing site, and then made for a small patch of green that lay just below the tree line, surrounded by stunted firs. The dragon glided towards it like a huge bird, beating his wings powerfully once or twice, until he almost stationary in the air, and then came gently down from the trees. Their legs stiff, Ben and Sorrel climbed off Firedrake's back and looked around. A mountain towered high in the sky above them. The dragon yawned and looked around for a sheltered place among the rocks, whilst the riders made their way cautiously to the rim of the plateau. The sight of cows looking no bigger than beetles on the green slopes below made Ben feel quite dizzy, and he quickly took a step backwards. What's the matter? Asked Sorrel sarcastically, venturing too close to the edge of the chasm that her furry toes were over empty space. Don't you like mountains? I'll get used to them, replied Ben. You have to get used to the flying, right? He turned to look at Firedrake, who had found a good place and was coiled in the shadow of the projecting rock, muzzle on his paws, tail tucked around him. Flying is terribly tiring for dragons, Sorrel whispered to Ben. If they don't sleep it off, they get melancholy. So melancholy they can't do anything with them. And if it rains as well, she added, rolling her eyes. Oh, my word. But luckily, she decided, looking up the sky, luckily it doesn't look like at all it's going to rain. Or do you want to argue about that too? Ben shook his head and looked around. The way they gape at everything, I guess you've never been in the mountains before, have you? Asked Sorrel. I once went tobogganing downhill on a rubbish tip, said Ben, but it was no higher than the tree over there. He sat on his backpack on the grass, which was wet with dew. He felt extremely small among the tall peaks, as small as an insect, but all the same he could hardly feel all of this round and craggy summits rising against the horizon. On one peak far away from the ruins, Ben saw a castle. It towered back into the morning sky, and although it seemed not much bigger than a matchbox, it still looked menacing. Look, Ben nudged Sorrel. See that castle over there? The brownie yawned. Where? Oh, that, she yawned again. What about it? There are lots of those where Firedrake and I come from. Old human dwellings. You ought to know about them. Opening her backpack, she stuffed into her mouth some more of the leaves she'd picked up under the bridge. There we are. She threw her backpack down on the grass. One of us can have a snooze now while the other one keeps watch. Shall we toss for it? No, it's okay. Ben shook his head. You lie down. I couldn't sleep at the moment anyway. Whatever you say. Sorrel marched over to the place where Firedrake was sleeping. But don't go falling off anything, will you? She called back over her shoulder. Then she curled up beside the dragon, and the next moment she too was asleep. Ben took a spoon and a can of ravioli out of his backpack, opened the can with his penknife, and sat down with it on the grass, at a safe distance from the precipice. As he ate the cold pasta, he looked around him, remembering that he was on watch. He glanced at the castle. There were tiny specks circling in the clear sky above it. Ben couldn't help thinking of the ravens Gilbert Greytail had mentioned. Oh, come off it, he thought. I'll be seeing ghosts next. The sun rose higher and higher, driving the mist out of the valleys, and making Ben feel drowsy, so he rose to his feet and walked up and down for a while. When Sorrel began snoring, he went over to her, looked in her backpack, and found Gilbert Greytail's map. So we're going to stop the story there for today, and we are going to have a look at doing some questions based on what we've read. So we are looking at the true or false questions again. Okay, now this type of question will give you 4 different sentences. Okay, sometimes it might give you the 4 different sentences, but it might not show them like this, and we're going to do one of those examples. And it's basically asking you to summarise what you've read, but you've got to summarise it by ticking what's true and what's false, okay? Now, the false questions you have to be careful with because they are purposely designed to be closer to the truth. So although there might be similar words in it, you have to read them carefully to identify whether they are true or false. So what I would like to do is pause the video. You should have a copy of this in front of you, or you can read it off the screen. I'd just like you to read this little part of the story. Okay, so we're going to look at one of these questions. So which 2 things are true about the traveller? Now, I'm going to start from the first one and work my way through. So I'm going to start with he knocked on the door twice. So, is anybody there, said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door? Okay, so he's knocked on the door once. And his horse in the silence champed the grasses of the forest's ferny floor. Now, it doesn't mention anything else about him knocking on a door now. So what I'm going to do is, rather than read the whole thing, I'm going to scan. So I'm going to have a look across the text with my eyes. I'm going to see if I can find any mention of the word knocked or door. So I'm going to scan and I'm going to start looking down. I've got about the head. He smoked. Oh, something about the door second time. Well, I know that second time is linked to something being done twice. Now, when he smote upon the door again, smote means to knock or to bang. So it says here he smote upon the door again a second time. Well, I've already identified he did it once here. Now he's done it twice. And my statement here says he knocked on the door twice. So I can say that that's true. Okay, I've identified that in my text. Now I'm going to look at this one and say he had grey eyes. So I'm looking for a clue in my text where it says grey eye. Oh, okay, I found it down here. Now, it says looked into his grey eyes. So now I'm thinking, is he talking about himself or is he talking about the person that might have opened the door? So I need to read back a little bit. Is there anybody there? He said, but no one descended to the traveller. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes. So that's telling me that no one's looking into his eyes. And now he's describing his eyes as being grey. So I know that that statement there is true. Now it says here, tick 2 things. But I need to double check that I actually haven't made a mistake. So I'm still going to check these 2 just in case. So he leaned over the sill. Well, it says here, no head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over. Now, if I read that sentence and I know that it was someone looking into his eyes, he's not talking about him leaning over that sill. He's talking about somebody else leaning over. It says no head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes. He can't look into his own eyes. So he's describing somebody else leaning over. But my statement here says he leaned over. Now I know that's not true, so I know I've got this one correct. Now I'm going to look for he descended from the turret. So I'm looking for keywords of descended and turret. If I have a nosy through my text, right, there it is. But no one descended to the traveller. Now, this story is being told on behalf of the traveller, and it says no one's descended to him as the traveller. But here it says he descended from the turret, but he didn't. He's describing that nobody else did. So I know that that one's false as well. So here you can see, although yes, I've got 4 statements, and I've had to identify which ones are true, which ones are false, my false ones are still very, very close to the original text. It's just the odd word that's changed that's made me have to think about what I've read. So what I want you to do is have a go at reading this one. Okay, and we'll have a go at doing this one together. So if you have a look, you should have this sheet in front of you. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I just want you to have a quick read of this information. Okay, so we're going to use this information to now help us answer these questions. So number 1 says the information was compiled, so written, by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. So I'm going to look at the top. Now my title says Arctic animals most at risk. And then it says, according to the International Union of the Conservation of Nature, these Arctic species are threatened with extinction. Now it says they're according to. So this is information that's being reported by the IUCN, so the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So I know that one there is true. Okay, so I can tick that one as true. Then it says the walrus is classed as more under threat than the fin whale. So if I have a look, this is the endangered list here, and it starts with the most critically endangered and works its way backwards to the least endangered. Okay, so if I find the walrus, it says the walrus here is vulnerable. And then it says that it's more classified as more under threat than the fin whale. Now, if I move further up this way, the fin whale's all the way up here. Now, it says that it's vulnerable, but then it says here it's endangered. Now, if I look at the colours of my scheme along here, as we start to go from blue to green into orange into reds, they're starting to get more endangered. Now, my orange one here, which is vulnerable, my walrus is less endangered than the fin whale. So that statement there is actually false. So you need to put a cross in that box. Now, the vulnerable species have a high risk of extinction. So I need to think, well, where does it mention anything about vulnerable species and the word extinction? Now, if I have a look at the conservation scale, it tells me a bit of information about all the different parts of the scale. So let's find the vulnerable one. So the vulnerable one says high risk of extinction in the wild. Now, it says here vulnerable species have a high risk of extinction. So that one is indeed true. So we can give that one a tick. Now, the humpback whale is the most endangered species of whale. Okay, so I need to identify all the different types of whales. So if I start from the top, and we're going to make our way down because we'll hit the very first endangered one. So here we've got trout. Well, that's obviously not a whale. And then here we have the fin whale. Okay, now we're looking at whales, and it's told me in my statement that the humpback whale is the most endangered. Well, actually, the first endangered whale I've actually found is actually the fin whale. And if I scroll all the way down and look all the way down here, the humpback whale isn't even on the list at the moment. Okay, either the beluga whale and the fin whale are the two most endangered ones at the moment. So that one is going to be false. So you need to put a cross in that box. So well done if you got all of those ones correct. Now, what you're going to have a go at doing is you're going to have a go at designing your own ones. Okay, so can you write your own true and false statements about chapter 8? Now, you can set it out like this. Okay, or you can set it out like we did on this question here. Okay, so you can set it out like that statement, or you can set it out like this. And what you'll need to ensure is that you know the facts of your story. So you need to know the information we've read so far in the chapter. So make sure you've read the text carefully so that you're able to write your own one. Now, your true and false statements will indicate to me whether you've fully read and understood the chapter. Okay, so I'll know whether you've been able to summarise the information you had because your questions will have a clear true and false answer. Now, what I would like to do is I would like you to write 3 sets of true and false statements. So this one here would be considered as one set of 4 statements. And you need to work out how many of them will be true and how many of them false. You need to effectively create 3 sets of these pictures here, or 3 sets of these questions, or you can mix and match. I don't mind, whichever one suits you. But rather than doing just being 4 statements, so 4 statements here would link to one whole question, okay? And I want you to do 3 sets of questions, okay? So make sure you reread the chapter and have a go at writing your statements. Remember, your false statements are going to be very similar. So think about what words you could change that's going to help you with your statements, okay? So give them a go and see how you get on. All right, good luck, year 5.